on internet. There we go. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a voice on the face of Dr. Tolu Olabintan, CEO, founder of Living Spring Family Medical Center here in the good city of Mansfield, Texas. I'm here with another Facebook Live with the awesome Dr. Rashmi Shram. She's a friend, she's a colleague, and she's a meditation expert. I'm going to give her a second to introduce herself to you. But today we'll be talking about meditation and how that can help deal with anxiety. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Dr. Rashmi. For those who are watching, kindly let people know who are you and what do you do.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Tolu. This is an absolute pleasure for me. And your kind words are amazing, but I don't know that I would call myself a meditation expert. The way I see it is I've been meditating for a few years. I'm passionate about teaching it, and I'm a certified teacher, but I'm ultimately just a student, a lifelong student of figuring this same path out. So yeah, I am a family physician. I am a certified coach, and I'm also certified to teach meditation. Meditation has changed my life in a million different ways, and I'm passionate about teaching it, like I mentioned, and we thought we could talk about that a little bit today. I'm also the founder of Optimal Wellness, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Awesome. And the reason why we chose this topic is because I believe that just like you do, we help our patients live better quality of lives because we believe that the quantity and the quality are both important. So we help patients live long and well, and we know that this is one of the ways to do so. That helps people also relax and also helps people. And it's relatively cost effective. It's not invasive. You don't have to take medications. It's something that you could do. So before I get too much into the meat of it, I wanted for people who are wondering, well, why do you do what you do? Why did you choose to venture into this path?
Yeah, for sure. So over the last, 10 years, something like that, I started to experience a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of insomnia. I had a lot of burnout, and it was a slow churn kind of thing. I was working a lot of hours in a stressful job. My husband was working a lot of hours in a stressful job. We had 2 young kids. I mean, I think this is an identifiable situation for most of us. And I really didn't understand how to handle stress at all. It wasn't something that I had any skills in, to be honest with you. And so as I started to dig my way out, because I actually ended up getting fairly sick for a fairly long period of time. It wasn't that I ever missed work, but emotionally, I wasn't very well. Mentally, I wasn't very well. I felt very worried and anxious all the time. I wasn't sleeping very well. I wasn't taking care of myself. And ultimately all that spread into, the people around me. And when I started to have, GI issues, again, really stress related when I look back on it, and migraines, I was having daily migraines. It was one of these things where medicines weren't working for me. And I knew that I had tried meditation before. So I actually grew up in India. I was around meditation for my childhood. I wouldn't say I was a meditative child or anything, but it felt like home for me. And then when I was in college, I had found a group that I had meditated with. And actually back then I was like a closet meditator. I was embarrassed to tell people that I was meditating because I was worried. I wanted to go to medical school. What would they think of me? All these things. And so it was about 10 years ago when I was really kind of spiraling, that I went back to meditation. And because I knew the studies, I knew that it could help my insomnia, it could help my migraines, it could help my anxiety. And as I started to get a little deeper into the practice, I definitely saw the results like very quickly for myself. And ultimately, though, it wasn't like I just, became some big yogi or anything like that. I was one of these people that was like a crisis meditator. Like I would meditate for a while. I'd feel great, and then I'd forget about it for a few months. And then I get like really like I couldn't sleep again. So then I go back. So that happened to me for a while until about 9 years ago. And then I was just like, you know what, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to double down. I'm really just going to go all in. And so that's my story as to how I came to meditation. And as I started to get deeper into my practice, it just naturally spilled over, right? Like in my office, I would just pull people over, like, when I would see my staff, when I would see my, like anybody, I would start to talk to them about meditation. And then it spilled over into, oh, this center is looking for somebody to teach meditation. And so as I was teaching what I knew, I really felt like I needed to have a deeper understanding. So that's when I went back and I took deep dives into meditation, and I like taking tests. So I had them give me some tests.
Make it to make it
Yeah.
legit.
So ultimately, that's how I came to be a certified meditation teacher, is because ultimately it has been healing for me, healing for other people as well.
Awesome, awesome. By the way, Dr. Dada and Dr. Una say hi.
Hi,
They're-
Dr. Dada, Dr. Una.
Now, I love how your personal experience has tied into why you do what you do. I think a lot of patients and clients, of course, will resonate well with that message because you feel their pain points. You know where it hurts. You can relate to some of the experiences with problems with sleep, with anxiety, because as we know it, life has a way of throwing things at you, and so learning how to deal with stress is very, very, very important, or learning how to deal with anxiety triggers. And COVID has been a big glaring in your face trigger for a couple of years now. I think people are making it through, but this is definitely an option for people to tap into as well. So thank you for sharing your story. So now let's talk a little bit about anxiety. Um, is a term that I think sometimes patients don't like to be labeled as anxious, but let's call it what it is: anxiety. What is it, and like what would you define it to be as people are watching?
Yeah, in the DSM-5, that's such a good question. We know that there are a variety of different anxiety disorders, if you will, right? So we can have panic disorder, we can have generalized anxiety disorder, we can have
Okay.
PTSD. But ultimately, to really distill the whole thing down, I have felt anxiety. You have probably felt
Mhm.
anxiety. The vast majority of human beings have felt anxiety. And what it really boils down to is a feeling of worry. It's a feeling of a lot of concern about the future. It could be about the past, but it is something that when it persists time and time again, that it can keep us from living a joyful life. It can keep us from feeling inner peace. It can keep us from healing when we need to heal. And so when it starts to get in the way, it isn't that anxiety or worry as categorically is bad, but we know, obviously, even before COVID, there was an epidemic of chronic daily stress. And then the pandemic added so much more stress onto that. And by the
Yes.
way, the way that I define stress is really our perception of a threat, whether it's physical or emotional, right? And so that's why different people can perceive different situations as being stressful or not so stressful.
Mhm.
And so we know objectively that the world has too much stress. And we know that the vast majority of people at one time or the other during COVID, or even before COVID, or now on year 3 of
Mhm.
COVID, we're feeling anxious. And there's a war that just started overnight, in Europe. So there are reasons to be feeling somewhat worried. And so that's how I think of anxiety.
Okay. I like that you mentioned is a perceived, like for you, maybe like being in the crowd, not a big deal, or having this much pressure at work, maybe something you eat for breakfast. But for some, that's overwhelming because there's a pressure perceived or there's a threat perceived. I like the way you define that. Now, how do you start? Let's go right into meditation. How do you start? Because someone is thinking, well, yeah, I want to meditate. How do I start?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. If it's okay, I'd just like to define what meditation is, because sometimes starting at the root and then building a big, strong foundation is helpful. So, meditation is really, really simple. It is the act of going from activity into stillness or silence, right? It's an inner journey. That's really all it is. And it is a formal practice of mindfulness, right? And so, we can use mindfulness a lot of times as well. The way that most people define mindfulness is the awareness that arises when we are paying attention to this present moment
Hmm.
on purpose, without judgment, and with curiosity, right? And so it's incredibly simple. And our best
Make
teachers are
it
actually
sound simple.
children.
Make it sound.
It's simple, but it's not easy. But our best teachers are children. Like this week, my niece and nephew, they're 6 and 4. They were visiting, and because of COVID, I hadn't seen them very much. They don't live in town, and I just am astounded by how just naturally mindful creatures they are. They are constantly curious. They are not ruminating about a conversation they had an hour ago. They're not worried about, they're here. They're not judging. They're curious. And so really what that means to me and what we know is it is our natural tendency to be mindful. It is not our natural tendency to be worried or concerned about something in the past or about the future. It's just something that we have developed as a coping mechanism because of the stress. And so ultimately then it's not that we ever have to learn anything new. It's already inside of all of us. All we have to do is figure out the route or the way to tap into it. So if that makes sense, it just gives us a whole different perspective of like, meditation is actually just paying attention to this very present moment on purpose, which frankly, I don't do very much unless I really am trying to do it.
So it's practice, is intentional. And
it's practice, it's intentional. Yeah, that's right. And then there's an awareness that comes up from that, right? And that's really where the secret sauce is. It's like the awareness of, oh, like I actually do have this little pain in my knee. Maybe I don't want to go for that 4-mile run or whatever it is. But you can have so much awareness if we're not on our phones while we're talking to somebody, if we're not, writing an email while we're talking to somebody, all of those things. But, to your question of like, how can we get started with meditation? It's incredibly simple now that we know what it is we can choose to just pay attention to this present moment at any point, right? So the kinds of meditation that I teach, there's a couple of different kinds that I teach. And one is a mantra-based meditation where we focus our minds. And again, it's training the mind, not controlling the mind. We focus on a mantra, which is just a mind instrument. So that's one kind of meditation that I teach. And then I teach a fully guided meditation as well, known as Yoga Nidra. And so ultimately in both of those, our job isn't to be completely clear of all thoughts. It's not to feel chill. It's not to set up the most amazing environment. It's just to make a decision, an intentional decision, to pay attention and be curious to whatever opens up during a meditative practice.
I like that. Mindfulness, being open to what, wow. It sounds simple, but I'll be honest with you, it's something that has to be practiced because we're
100%. And listen, and it's impossible to be mindful all the time. And I don't recommend being mindful all the time, right? We do need to be on autopilot because the brain is always looking to take up the least amount of resources. And it is taking up some extra resources when we're paying attention. But ultimately, when you look at what happens physiologically during meditation, mindfulness, that practice is we move from that sympathetic go, go, go drive, right? That's anxiety, that's worry, that's concern.
Fight or flight, yeah.
Yeah, that's the fight or flight response. And even like first time meditators, even in the first 5 minutes of a meditative practice, what we see is we move away from that sympathetic go, 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 fight or flight into the parasympathetic rest and restore response. And what happens there is the exact opposite, right? And so I think of it as a seesaw. It's not like one is good or one is bad. What's happened for us is we live too much in the sympathetic drive. And so what can happen is our heart rate can stay up, the blood pressure can stay up. We take these short, shallow breaths. Blood is shunted from the digestive tract. There's different shunting happening in the brain when we're feeling really stressed, right? So there's a lot more blood flow into the limbic system, which is our fight or flight, the amygdala. But what happens during meditation, and this just keeps getting stronger and stronger, is the opposite of that. You're not even trying to control your breath. You're not even trying to slow your breath down, but it automatically slows down. The heart rate automatically goes down. The blood pressure automatically goes down. Blood is, because during a fight or flight, think about, what our ancestors had to deal with. They had to run from saber-toothed tigers and hide in a cave. It wasn't a great time to worry about reproduction or digestion. So blood would be shunted from that, right? And so when we're in the rest and restore, blood comes back to its natural state. There's homeostasis, which is that dynamic non-change in the midst of constant change. And that's where healing starts to happen. And even in the brain, we start to have more and more access to the prefrontal cortex. That's the parent part of our brain. That's where we have access to creativity. That's where we have access to our higher intellectual centers, to our emotional centers, all of that. So we can still be under stress, but we can be making these decisions that we're capable of, because I know that when I'm feeling overly stressed, I'm making some pretty bad decisions.
Yes. Yes, and the point you made here about the importance of this, I want to emphasize because some people are probably thinking, well, I'm glad you have time to do this. But see it from the standpoint of I'm doing this so I can help my brain help navigate what's ahead. All right. Because when you're anxious, you cannot think clearly. You're not able to make sound decisions. It's almost like you're in was it a mice in what's that cart you keep rolling?
Yeah, like a little wheel. Yeah, a
Yeah,
little
yeah, and
hamster
you're
wheel.
just going
Yeah.
like this. It makes you feel like you're doing something, but you're not. But when you start from the place of meditation, where you allow your brain almost like to relax and think clearly, or then you're positioned for a better outcome that day. One of the things I've started to do as well is meditate as well. I meditate on the Bible. And today I read about the spirit of power and love and a sound mind, that God has not given me the spirit of fear. And so I'm like, wow. So I speak to myself, I read the word, and I say, you know what? When fear is presented to me, when anxiety is presented to me, I can choose to resist it. Not to say that what's on ground is not an issue, is to say, you know what can I do about the situation? God will help me through the situation. I just need to navigate like the wisdom points, like what do I need to do to address this? So it's not you're disregarding what's there and saying, I don't care. It's saying, okay, life is going to throw stuff at me. What can I do to arm myself or better prepare me to take on those challenges? So I'm not doing this and feel like I'm doing something, but I'm really not. Okay, so meditation is a good practice. It's a good way to arm yourself for the day. And you had mentioned something earlier that you tended to do this um, when there was a stressor. Like when there was a stressful period, you would do it, feel good, and then like, psh, it's very important. And I'm emphasizing this here for those who are watching to do these preventive things ahead of time. You do not prepare for war at a time of war. You prepare at a time of peace. And so these tools, as simple and frou-frou as they may sound, are very effective because they also help with the rewiring of your brain. So when you see a challenge, your natural instinct doesn't become freak out. It's, oh no, I've been prepared for this. Does that you get what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that people see this as something that can be very, very useful, and can be very helpful. And I'm glad you're here. So next next question. How do you start? There's someone saying, Doc, I'm happy for you. You probably have 25 hours in a day and I only have 24. How do I start?
That's a great question. So sometimes when I am working with whether it's a patient or a client and their anxiety is like 15 out of 10, let's say, or they're just not able to sit still for a short period of time, we just work on breath work. We just work on belly breathing, making sure we begin with some deep breaths. And we just start doing that 2 or 3 minutes twice a day. That's really what we start with, right? And so ultimately, if we're just paying attention to our breathing, that's a really wonderful way to do that. Mindfulness, as I described to you, it's the act of paying attention to this present moment. So if somebody is way up here and they just cannot seem to sit still, that's okay. We just have them take mindful walks, right? And so what does that look like? It looks like noticing things, noticing sounds, looking at what's there, right? And so that you can have a mindful walk. You can wash the dishes mindfully. You can cook mindfully. You can have a mindful conversation. And all of those things mean that when you find that your mind is in a different place, then all you have to do is just bring it back to this present moment. And so because we're used to these quick little pings of dopamine hits, whether it's on social media or text or email or whatever, our brains can become programmed to look for something else. And so it's a matter of just creating a little bit of space. And then as that space gets created, I really work with folks who, like I said, who are interested in the mantra-based meditation. So it can become a really fast, powerful tool. Ultimately, meditation in general should feel effortless and it should feel incredibly easy, right? And so it should not start off feeling easy. If it does, then maybe you're a kid, because that's amazing, because kids are pros at this. They're absolute pros at meditation and mindfulness. They just are, because that's who we all were before the stress accumulated. And so the way to start could be to take a mindful walk. It could be to just pay attention to your breath. It could be one of the apps that are out there, and deciding to spend 5 minutes, honoring 5 minutes for yourself, and the ultimately not getting frustrated with whether you have a lot of thoughts or whether you feel restless, understanding that mindfulness in no way, shape, or form in meditation is there the word peaceful or chill or calm. That's not part of the definition. It can be part of your result,
Right.
but it is an
Absolutely.
awareness that we're looking for. So when you become aware that you are restless, you are being mindful. And so knowing that you can start with just 2 minutes a day, you can start with movement, you can start with cooking mindfully, you can start with so many different ways of just removing judgment and paying attention to what's going on.
I like it. So practice. For those of you who are watching who are thinking, oh, I don't know about this, give it a try. Like with anything, when you start off, it may seem a little, like what am I doing, or a little unusual, but it's also good to. It's good. It gets better with practice. So she talked about belly breathing or taking a mindful walk. Not you're walking and you're looking at your phone. But you're taking in what's around you. You're being mindful what's around you. You're being present, truly present, undistracted, and that takes practice. Um, you mentioned for those that who are always used to being multitaskers. Sometimes that's hard. I think especially as women, we have to multitask. We feel we can do 10 things at the same time, but sometimes practicing just doing one thing at a time and being there adds much or holds much value. Thank you, Rashmi, Dr. Rashmi. This is good. Now, three best tips for those who are watching. Three best tips. You may have touched on it already, but people are saying, okay, all right, can you say that again, docs? What are three good tips as far as meditation that you give to those who are watching?
Yeah, so the three best tips are: don't wait for the most perfect time. Don't wait until you feel chill. Don't wait until you're in your Zen den. Don't wait. Just get started, right? So that's the first thing, is just try it out. All you need is to sit down and close your eyes and notice your breath. Do that for 2 minutes. Do that for 3 minutes. So don't wait would be the first
What
thing.
if you fall asleep?
That's
Sorry.
okay. That's a valid experience. That's a valid experience. Yeah, exactly. And the second thing is, you do not need to control your thoughts. And so that's a common perception that people come in with, whether they've tried meditation or they don't want to try it because of that. So it is really the act of witnessing our thoughts, right? So we are not our thoughts. And so as the thoughts come, noticing the thoughts, allowing the thoughts to go, coming back to the breath, or coming back to the guidance, or coming back to the mantra. So either way, we are not trying to control anything, especially our thoughts, because control really is a battle if you think about it. And this is a non-striving, this is a not battling situation. All we're doing is training the mind. So if you look at if you it's so astounding to me when you start to talk to interviews within Olympic level athletes. They're not talking about competition at all. Almost never are they talking about other people. They're always talking about their own training and their own path, right? And so that's what we get to do, is everybody's meditative journey is going to be a little bit different. But ultimately, if you're ready for some self-healing that's free, it's available to you all the time. If you're ready for relief from anxiety, which, by the way, those are some of the big benefits. Within just 2 or 3 weeks, we see huge drops in levels of anxiety. Depression symptoms improve, PTSD improves within the yoga nidra that I have told you about. And as time goes on, those benefits just accumulate and accumulate, and over time the brain itself completely looks different. So the prefrontal cortex is much thicker, the gray matter is much thicker, and our ability to handle more and more stress just becomes easier and effortless. So it's not that you're only going to do it for 2 minutes every day. If that's all you can do, that's totally fine. But to get started, once you start to see the benefits, you might want to move it to 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day, right? And then the third thing is, once you've kind of muddled through, if there is such a word, because I know I muddled through it, and I still muddle through it, really, right? Through some of my meditations now, is maybe to find a teacher or to have a friend who meditates with you, because we know that as human beings, we're constantly connected to each other, and being able to have a conversation about it, especially if you're having some interesting, things pop up during meditation or out of meditation, it can be a huge help, right? And so we're programmed to learn from other human beings. Apps are great, and books are great, and podcasts are great, and I use all of those things. But ultimately, if there is a deep interest, then I would say it might be helpful to find a teacher.
Okay, awesome, and I like that. Now let's talk real quick about content. of meditation. For those who are wondering, like for me, as a Christian, I meditate on the Bible. Is there you have any tips on choice of content, or like does it? What are your thoughts on that?
So I like to keep it simple because then it can apply to everybody, right? And so meditation is like gravity. Everybody, it applies to everybody. It isn't like it's just for one subset of people. And so the thing that we always have with us from the time we're born to the time we die is our breath. And so that's usually the simplest and generally very effective place to start, is to just sit down and notice your breath for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And you can add intentions to that. You can add some ancient wisdom like you are to that. You can really add anything else that seems appropriate for you. But ultimately, it's that inner journey, it's that awareness that really starts to show up the longer that we do it. And so there isn't like a wrong thing to meditate on, but it isn't like a prescribed, it has to be this candle, it has to
Right,
be,
right.
this particular type of meditation. No, there's no dogma around it. It's an inward journey, and it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. But generally, the best and first place to start is the breath.
With breathing, the awareness of your breath. Interestingly enough, I say that a lot to my patients that smoke. I say
Yeah.
sometimes the appeal is the deep breathing too.
Yes, for
It's just,
sure. For sure. They're
yeah,
going into a parasympathetic response. I absolutely agree
yeah.
with that.
So
Yeah.
it's so sometimes to trying to yank that off and say, hey, stop smoking. I'm like, maybe we practice deep breathing first and kind of use that as part of the transition. So the deep breathing is very, very important. Content can be different for you, can be it could be ancient wisdom, like you mentioned. For me, as the Bible, I do meditate on that a lot. And but starting from the place of deep breathing is also a good start. I will advise, as far as meditation, don't ruminate on something it's negative.
No.
Okay, yeah, try not to. That's key. But Dr. Rashmi, people are wondering, like this doc is amazing. She seems very cool. She seems very zen. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So my website is optimalwellnessmd.org. I have a YouTube channel that has a whole bunch of different meditations for people to try. It's all free. I also have some blogs and information on my website there as well. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, all really my name. So if you went in and put in my name, but I would say if you're curious to try, that mantra-based meditation that I'm talking about, I have one that's perfectly free. There's a few others that are guided that are perfectly free, that are really evidence-based and have been studied for, the last 25 years and practiced for over 3,000 years. So ultimately, that might be the best evidence we have, is if we can trace a practice back to 5,000 years, there must be
Wow.
a reason that our ancestors
Wow.
thought this was important to pass down from teacher to student in this particular way. And so I would love for people to find me. Right now, I actually have a bundle package if somebody's ready to take a dive, to have a teacher, like I mentioned. And it's 35 days of on demand, and there's 2 live sessions that we do with interaction. And I offer people support as well, email support. And plenty of people have joined. It just opened. And what I mean is they're actually emailing me already, asking me questions that are really, really good questions that I've been
Hmm.
able to go back to the group with and say, hey, like, I know it seems like you should do this, but that's not even necessary. Your whole job is just to lie down and follow along, because this is a sleep-based meditation. And so in that way, they're learning from each other. They're really understanding how differently they can feel, because meditation ultimately is not about how we feel during the meditation. It's like you said, right? Like, you're setting yourself up for a different kind of day when you're doing your meditation, and so am I. And so I don't miss my morning meditation. I wake up earlier, I make it a priority. It has been a game changer for me in so many ways, which means that I know when I put in 20 minutes into a meditation, I guarantee you, if there was a way for me to track it, I'm getting 40 minutes out in terms of productivity and focus, because I have what we know is neuropeptides change, right? So we have increases in serotonin, in dopamine, in norepinephrine, decreases in cortisol. So that means I'm not looking for that quick dopamine hit, whether it's, on a
I got it.
scroll or, so like, I know that it's worthwhile for me to do it. Like, I have seen it personally over and over and over again. And so I would say, give these free things a try. If you're ready to join me, I'd love for you to join me too.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. And after the live, I will post all that information for those who are watching on the YouTube page and as well as on the Facebook page. All right. Thank you so much for coming. It was really an honor having you here. I would like to share this quick verse real quick. It's it's Philippians 4:8. It said, whatever things are good, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, think on these things, meditate on these things. There's power in meditation. This has
Yeah.
been the voice of Dr. Olabintan. And if you or anyone you know is looking for an awesome, a thorough, passionate family physician that meditates, I am she. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Awesome having you on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tolu.